hopefully the sound will come up. Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. We are at the Michigan State University Offices of Infrastructure Planning and Design. Our audio situation is not ideal, but the situation is real. We have our colleague from Florida, Dan Haran, who has a vote on this particular committee, and we have been talking over the past few sessions, past few months about how we might mark up the next revision of the fire alarm code. And I'm going to let Dan, since this is his passion and expertise, talk a little bit about, and then we're going to move into what we think we might want to use these reserved chapters for. It's no accident that NFPA blocked out numerically spaces for where they knew new content was going to need to happen. So that's where Dan will come in, since he's a little bit closer to this. But nothing I would like better than to have campus fire alarm systems and mass notification here is chapter 13. But I am getting ahead of myself. So go ahead, Dan, give us an update on Class N, and then let's talk a little bit more about what our plans are for those two new reserve chapters. Go ahead.
Okay. So chapter 12 is a fairly short chapter. Let's see if I can just click next here to get to the next page. And okay, so we have Class A and B have been long-standing traditions in fire alarm. Basically, the Class A, I'll drive if you want, Mike.
Sure. Let me get you back on the.
I am. I think it's.
No, I took it away from you, but you now have it again. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So the Class A and Class B have been in the codes for many, many years. And basically, a Class A is a redundant self-monitored path. Class B is a single monitored path. So they report troubles when they occur. So now Class N is new, and we got away from, actually the title started at the bottom of the left column, but here is the meat of it.
Yeah,
so it's basically for networks. So Class N is for Ethernet specifically. And I'll go to the annex. Let me see. I thought if I'd click on these, I'd get an annex page. Let me try at the bottom. Yeah, well.
So you want to go to the back of the book?
Yeah, it's in Annex A. I don't see any search functions in here either.
No, that's the problem. When NFPA made it, they're doing the minimum necessary to meet the incorporation by reference requirement. So it really does help to get an NFPA subscription, a paid one where you can do more. Let me get you to that. Let me take control for a moment. I think I can do it faster for you.
Okay.
Give me a moment here, because I can see more on my screen.
Okay, so, but while you're doing that, I'll just kind of jump ahead to what we're talking about, Mike and I have talked about in terms of adding to the code, is that in the past it has been very prescriptive. In other words, it told you exactly how you had to monitor the wires and what they had to report, and that was, in effect, incompatible with Ethernet, because they had their own methods of handling things like grounding. And it just was a way that, people with an Ethernet component couldn't go to UL and say, I want to get this UL 864 listed as a fire alarm component. And it would have been modified in some way. So what we're doing, thinking in terms of performance-based, is what we want to do is put in writing in the code the thinking behind what we're requiring in fire alarm. It was up ahead, and it's still in A, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get you. I'm trying to get you to the top end of A, and I didn't realize Annex B had so much. This is the stuff they don't want to put in the code, and I would argue if you've got this much stuff in there, maybe it ought to be in the code. That's a marketing decision by. So I've got you to the front part of A, and I think
Yeah, we
probably.
want there's one picture in A24. In fact, I have already a printed copy of the book. I'm going to go get it so I can tell you what page number.
Okay,
Uh,
good. So with my old Mad Cat subscription, I was able to get there. So while you're doing that, some insight into an overall philosophy, if any, which I can say the University of Michigan is promoting, and one we think that the industry should follow, is the trend toward performance-based consensus documents. And the reason for that is that it tends to be give us more options. It gives the owner more options, but the owner will run into conflict with the enforcement interest. The enforcement interest is, my gosh, they don't even title this. Huh. It goes from 23 to 24. Don't you think they should have had like a break here? Guess not. Okay.
yeah.
So, and you can
Well,
summarize
the pic one. Yeah,
enforcement
there we go. Stop right on that picture.
right here. Is this
This.
what you want?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This is new and added because we added Class N, which has special requirements for Ethernet. We also added this picture into something that's been in the code since 2010 that said that it shall be permitted to connect ancillary equipment to the fire alarm panel. So notice this says it's brand X, brand Y, and brand Z. So these are different kinds of fire alarm panels, and again, the idea is that one that is working fine but was installed 20 years ago shouldn't have to be replaced just because you want to connect it to something. So that's why we're taking disparate kinds of panels, but we're using Ethernet going into a cloud, and then you can have the data come to computers and cell towers and so on. So this is a new example diagram of something that's been in the code since 2010, but it was kind of small and unnoticeable without a picture.
Okay. So, yeah, so you can't put pictures in the code itself. I've tried to do this myself. Pictures, I believe, only belong in annexes, with few exceptions. Go ahead, Dan. And if we can wrap the whole thing up in about 5-10 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, so the idea is that for all these components are really not going to be tested as fire alarm components. It's in fact, companies have tried. There was a UL864 computer manufactured by IBM, and it was $12,000 a distributor cost for a 486 computer at a time when 486 you could buy a Pentium computer for about $1,000.
So is it something specific? So that's a big deal. What your output terminals, your user interface terminals, UL is restricting them. I think the hope we have is that you can actually use a regular old PC for that. And of course, I know that the life safety folks will not like that. And that's, I believe, the battleground upon that UL has to deal with. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, and what it's kind of come down to is that if you're not using the computer to control the system, then the requirement for UL is just not there. So so supplemental is the key word here, that and it says now that it shall be permitted to connect supplemental equipment. And the significance of that is that if the owner wants to do it, the shall be permitted means that even the fire official can't tell him not to.
Okay, good. So that's in the code now. Is that right?
Yep, in the 2010.
Okay.
And
good.
this picture is just simply added this time to illustrate what we meant by that.
Okay. All right. So that's an important element here when we think about what barriers we face in trying to drive value in an industry through standards. Very often we spend a lot of time telling them what's already possible. This stuff has already been done, but it's just not in your specification or part of your engineering culture. Could we we need to finish up, Dan, on
okay.
Let's get. Can we get to where you want to? We want to use chapter 13. Is that what we were thinking?
I'm open to wherever other people think it should fit, but I think, going back to the idea of performance-based and when it comes to computers and network components, there are, for example, some mil-spec things that, that basically if they build it to a military specification, it's going to be hardened to a certain degree, drop-proof, that kind of thing. That might be an alternate to having UL. Another is mean time between failure ratings and also temperature ratings. So if it meets the temperature ratings, it meets drop tests, mean time between failure, those kinds of things should be able to be considered when it comes to qualifying fire alarm components.
So Dan, the question one of the core decisions we have to make is how much of the existing computer networks, even the ones that are using for information networks, can be used to drive life safety and fire alarm signals. This is a key question. I know that conceptually, I think a lot of people feel comfortable with it. What are the barriers to expanding the use of Internet protocol for all of our fire alarm systems?
That is now described in a section, and I'm trying to go up. Okay, previous, I know. Okay, so there's a shared pathway designations. So we have designations to let engineers actually specify, and owners specify exactly what they want in a particular application. And you could even combine parts of it. Say inside a building might be shared pathway level 3, which means that you have all hardware and wire dedicated to the life safety system. But then as you go between buildings, maybe it's acceptable to have another level.
Okay, so that's a key area that we want to. I think when we looked at those, that was an area that we thought we could clarify. Now, to close out, and we will have to. You and I are going to have to develop this a little bit more. I'll try to get Josh and maybe some of our friends at VA in on a separate breakout session. Very often, these are coordination teleconferences. We just want to see who shows up in what specific areas. We know that we need to drill down on this. We have until June to put some ideas on paper, and hopefully we'll try to put some drafts together about what this might look like, and then run it up the flagpole and see what people think. So yep. I think, just to finish up on the performance then, I started to say a little bit about how across, I'm mentioning this to my colleagues at Michigan State because overall, the University of Michigan, it may not be a shared goal of all of academia or education facilities, is that we want to see more performance standards. We know that they work well in other nations. The difficulty we face on almost any front is that the enforcement interest, and very often labor turns into enforcement. Electricians turn into electrical inspectors. Fire alarm guys turn into chairmen of fire alarm boards on state commissions. That group there wants to see prescriptiveness because performance tends to put more of the onus on the owner or even the local agency. And so to a large degree, representing the user, owner, final fiduciary, and using the example and the precedent in other nations for performance standards is a cultural problem that will probably outlast me. But I just don't see how prescriptive requirements can continue to deliver results. You can see it particularly in the energy code. I think a lot of the prescriptive energy codes have lived out the ability of prescriptive requirements to meet those goals. So that's the end of my speech, and I'm grateful for your time, Dan. I'll give you a ring. I'm actually in the NEC meetings. Are you going to be there tomorrow? Are you involved at all in the NEC?
No, I'm not in NEC.
Well, send me an email. I'll pull somebody's chain there if you want. I think there was a 720, was it 780? Which article is it, the one that gives you fire alarm guys problems?
I believe 720.
720, okay. Let me know. I'll pull some chains there on your behalf if I can. I'm sorry to close this out. Everyone has time constraints. I'll put this up for your review, Dan. I don't think there's anything I regret saying. I'm just worrying about the audio here. But I'm grateful for our colleagues from Michigan State for hosting us here. We're going to close out this part of our meeting. We'll probably do some wrap-up material, and then we're heading out for lunch. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.